Welcome back to SME SDG Festival 2021, organized by UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei. Thank you for still staying here. And again, good morning and welcome to our participants who've just joined us. And again, like I mentioned, this is the SME SDG Festival 2021, organized by UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei. And a very big thank you before we proceed further to our partners, Sarawak Energy Berhad and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Thank you very much to our partners. Right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the first panel session in today's event. Let me just introduce the panelists. They are Mr. Sharmel Jehangir Ali, Head of Sustainability of PETRONAS Dagangan Berhad or PDB, Ms. Marian Dang, Sustainability Manager of H&M for Southeast Asia, Mr. Aaron Saw, Head of Policy and Technical of ACCA Maritime Southeast Asia, Mr. S.J. Shankar, Director and Sustainable Lead of MATRADE. And the topic which they will discuss is Mission Possible. We're going to look behind the challenges and ask the question, are sustainability opportunities real? So the panelists will address that question. And of course, the very big headline is Mission Possible. Now, if Mission Impossible has Tom Cruise as the lead actor, for Mission Possible, we have Johor's very own Tom Cruise to lead and moderate this session. He is none other than Mr. Edey Suresh, who is a respected journalist, editor, social entrepreneur, and strategist, born and raised in Johor Darul Takzim. He owns and operates the region's premier community newspaper called The Iskandarian under a public-private partnership with Iskandar Regional Development Authority or IRDA. Now, Edey is the founder of the Social Hero Foundation and the Iskandar Malaysia Social Hero Awards, or known as IMSHA, as well as the founding president of Johor Bahru Collective Media or JOCOM. Edey has an MBA and an executive certificate in sustainable business strategy from Harvard Business School, and he is a board director and the Johor State Director for the UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei. So I'm going to pass the floor over to Edey. Now remember, you can ask questions, share your thoughts and ideas and opinions throughout the discussion. You can join in the discussion, keep the chat box active with your thoughts and questions. And of course, Edey will pose the question for you to our panelists. So without further ado, Mission Possible, behind the challenges, are sustainability opportunities real? Over to you, Mr. Edey Suresh.
Good morning. Thank you, Rahim. That was a good, warm welcome. And thank you, most importantly, to our partners. Thank you to the UN Global Compact Network Malaysia and Brunei team for hosting this high-impact SME festival. I also extend my thanks to my distinguished panel of speakers. And most importantly, thank you to all the audience who are taking time out from your very Zoomified lives. You know, I know it's been a virtual year this year. And just thank you to all of you guys for tuning in and joining us today, right? So our panel discussion this morning is themed Mission Possible. Behind the challenges, are sustainability opportunities real? Now, this is an important question, and we have a beautiful lineup of speakers here, and we curated our panel session based on questions that we have received from SMEs. So our fantastic lineup of speakers will provide a snapshot of their journey, their experience, their expertise, and to give you a real-life perspective on what lies beneath it all, and signal a call to action for SMEs to adopt sustainable practices. With that, I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Sharmel Jehangir Ali, Head of Sustainability of PETRONAS Dagangan Berhad. Now, Sharmel has completed his degree in Environment Technology and has over 15 years of experience as a corporate sustainability practitioner. He was a consultant and lead for listed organizations in Malaysia. He has also led on projects that have featured and attained recognition across national and international platforms, including FTSE for Good, ACCA, and the Sustainability Business Awards. Sharmel was formerly head of sustainability at Axiata and also MISC. Currently, Sharmel is the head of sustainability at PETRONAS Dagangan, Berhad. So we welcome Sharmel. With Sharmel, we have Marian Dang, sustainability manager of H&M for Southeast Asia. Marian is the sustainability manager at H&M Southeast Asia, and H&M's aim of leading the change towards sustainable fashion. And Marian is appointed to successfully drive H&M's sustainability work in the region. So we welcome Marian as well. Now we have Aaron Saw, head of policy and technical of ACCA Maritime Southeast Asia. Aaron is the head of policy and technical at ACCA Maritime Southeast Asia. He promotes the sharing of ACCA professional insights, and his area of interest include the development of SMPs, digital technology, improving audit quality, improving corporate reporting, business resilience and sustainability, and analyzing business outlook and government policies impacting the accountancy profession. Aaron believes in sharing knowledge widely, and he designed the framework for SMP 100, a community for SMPs in Malaysia that supports the professional and development of each other. Next up, we have Shankar, Director and Sustainability Lead of MATRADE. Jay has a long profile, so I'm just going to give you a snapshot of it. Our KL Light, first class economics degree from University of Malaya, MBA, majoring in e-commerce. Jay, in his 20-year plus career, includes stints in 2 trade promotion agencies, namely the Malaysian Timber Council or MTC and the Malaysian External Trade Development Corporation or MATRADE, and media publications such as the New Straits Times, Malaysian Business Magazine, and he also had a spell at Institute of Strategies and International Studies at ISIS Malaysia. At MATRADE, his experience include leading trade promotions and communication projects in various regions. So, welcome, distinguished panel. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. So, the modus operandi today is, we're going to ask questions to the panelists, and we aim to keep it as an open discussion. We will be taking in questions from the audience at the end of the session. So feel free to put your questions across. I believe our panelists are also eager to answer your questions and whatever doubts that you may have. So with that, I welcome you to panel session 1. And today, I think it is important to understand that SMEs have to contend with the complex and unprecedented brew of social, environmental, market, and technological trends. They are increasingly being faced with pressure to meet and measure and manage their impact on environment, social, and governance. This requires sophisticated and sustainable based management. It's interesting to understand the challenges that they are facing, but it is also pivotal to understand the opportunities that lay ahead. So I want to kick off the session today, and I want to ask Sharmel an important question on what are some of the challenges that he sees in SMEs while adopting sustainable practices or even the SDGs. Sharmel, over to you, sir.
Okay, thanks so much, Edey. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to give a big thank you to GCMY Malaysia for inviting me to join this panel session. So I think, to answer your question, Edey, I think there's various challenges, especially from an Asian kind of standpoint as compared to the more advanced economies, where there's the pressure for supply chain to embark on a sustainability journey has been quite advanced over the last few years. But I think from a Malaysian or an Asian perspective, I think the expectations have certainly been elevated, especially over the last 2 years. So expectations, and this essentially has been driven by organizational stakeholders. So the pressure is coming from the organizations who are working with the supply chain, in particular like the investors, especially on topics such as climate change, as you're all probably fully aware. There's the COP26 conference, which is happening currently right now. Where there's very big discussions and elevated kind of like demand and expectations of organizations to join, and to not only join but to have very strong positions and enforcements when it comes to what do you call that? Their commitment towards net zero carbon positions, right? Because certainly I think if we go back to the very basic of it, I think there is an urgent need, given the situation of the planet that we're in right now, working towards a 1.5 degree scenario, so on and so forth. So as an outcome of this elevated expectations that organizations have, this obviously will be cascaded down towards the supply chain as well. But I think the challenge is that with the supply chain, I think it's understandable that I wouldn't say it's a disconnect, but it's more in terms of like capabilities, more in terms of understanding the myriad of what do you call that, indicators that they need to comply to, expectations of organization. So there needs to be a collaborative approach. So not so much like organizations expect the supply chain to kind of like, okay, you guys need to meet these criteria and you guys just run with it. I think there needs to be very strong partnership. So yeah, capability is one. And I think the other thing is in terms of costs as well. So I think there's a lot of fear when it comes to, okay, if we need to embark on becoming more sustainable, that obviously might require, more upfront costs for suppliers to take. But that may not necessarily be the case. And based on our experience as well, and also my experience, there may be some initial upfront costs, but obviously the returns can be recouped, in a short space of time. So I don't want to kind of like elaborate more on this. Perhaps we can discuss on this further. But I think
Yep.
I mean from my perspective, those are the kind of like challenges that is starting to come into play from a Malaysian context. Yeah.
True. I believe we are going to get this question for many SMEs. What is the cost involved and things like that? Because I think we have to localize the context based on what is feasible for them. But taking on that note, Aaron, what do you see as some of the challenges?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, some of the challenges are also mentioned by Sharmel. It's predominantly that SMEs now are so focused, are preoccupied with the survival and growth, and also changing the nature of work. During the pandemic, things have changed. They requires them to adopt digital transition. So with that in mind, some SMEs really struggle to see how sustainability fits into the whole picture, right? And primarily because they lack the awareness about sustainability, the business case for sustainability, and they do not have dedicated resources, dedicated person looking into it, and how that how the business can integrate the strategy together with sustainability. So one of the thing I think SMEs will have to do is really understand and attend sessions like this to get more information about what it is, what is all the SDGs. I know just before we came live, we had a discussion like SDGs. There's so many of them, 17, right, altogether. And could it be overwhelming for SMEs to really put the focus on all 17? Or perhaps they can narrow the focus on a few more material ones, right? That's directly related to the business. So I think is cost aside, right? Definitely there will be cost involved in it, but cost aside, I think is more of understanding what sustainability is about, and also dedicating resources that is dedicating identifying someone or a few colleagues in the team to go and do more research on this topic, attend more sessions like this, and then continue the conversation internally, right? So get everyone on board on how they can integrate sustainability into the business strategy. So you don't look at it as something totally independent.
True. We have to raise the awareness, and this is one of the opportunities of raising the awareness as well. Marian, what about on your end? Can you share with us what are among the challenges that you foresee as well?
Yes. So first of all, hi everyone. Good to be here and have this discussion with you. I can actually acknowledge what has been said before, because the main challenge for SMEs is that they may think the topic sustainability is so big, is so broad that they get overwhelmed. And the misconception sometimes is that as a small business or as an SME, they cannot do much to contribute to this big topic. Whereas that is the whole point, that we want to actually break it down, because everyone, whether you are an individual or an SME or more a larger company, everyone can contribute. So then the question is about how to break it down that works for you as your business. So aside of breaking it down in terms of the SDGs itself, maybe breaking it down in the value chain of your business. So whether it's a product or a service that you are offering, look into the value chain from the start all the way until the end, and where in this chain do you want to focus on, or can you actually focus on? So instead of focusing on all and trying to change it all, which becomes so overwhelming and complex, really look into maybe a small part of the value chain, which is a low-hanging fruit for you at this moment, and also where you can make an impact. So it's not about creating a big impact by changing everything and being so overwhelmed, but really focusing on progress instead of perfection. I think that's also something that SMEs can maybe remember. By doing something that is maybe small, they can create actually a big impact already. So breaking it down, looking into value chain, and looking into what is feasible for your product, your service, or your business at this moment in your own value chain, to get to know your own chain thoroughly.
Excellent. Thank you, Marian. I think you gave us some quotable quotes as well in what you just said. Thank you. Jay, over to you, sir. What do you see as a challenge?
Thank you, Edey. Thanks to UNGCC for the kind invite as well. I think fundamentally the word sustainability has been much abused and much misunderstood if it is not put into proper context. And I think that is what probably is happening largely to a lot of people in that ecosystem, in this ecosystem. So from an SME point of view, the moment he hears everything about conformity and compliance and all that, it becomes very overwhelming to read, right? But I think if they start contextualizing it from a different perspective altogether and say, hang on, now these has become opportunities, windows of opportunities for me. Let's take an exporter, for example. In the past, typically you need to compete on a couple of basic variables, right? You got to look at price, you got to look at quality, and well, maybe some track record and so on, right? So those are your opportunities for you to hit and get market access. But today, because of sustainability practices and so on, it has opened a different opportunity for you, right? You are now able to access those markets on a different variable, which in the past was never probably on the high priority list, but today it is, right? So if they contextualize the whole lot and suddenly see, wait a minute, this is a game changer. I am now able to start accessing buyers and importers and supply chain that perhaps in the past I was not able to, then I think the excitement level will move up. Rather than dragging their feet, they're going to run. Right? And rather than thinking of survivability, they're saying, hang on, this is going to be a catalyst. Right? So I think what is important for us in terms of messaging across, and that's what MATRADE is trying to do as well, is that we're trying to contextualize sustainability to different stakeholders. For exporters, it is opportunities. The 17 SDGs should be seen as not 17 problem statements, but 17 solution statements. Opportunities for them to go ahead and make a difference and create market access for themselves. So I think that's our take, Edey. Thank you.
Excellent, sir. Thank you. But now, speaking about opportunities, perhaps we can also dabble on, what are some of the examples that you guys can share on emerging trends that may offer opportunities for SME growth as well. Marian, I hand this over to you.
Yeah. Well, many opportunities, but first of all, something that Jay also mentioned about what does sustainability mean, right? So maybe for SMEs also to understand, when we talk about sustainability, actually it means to be relevant over the long term, to remain relevant. So that whether it is to focus on the environment or on the society, it's also about remaining relevant with your business over the long run. So one of the opportunities is, especially with the challenges that we face today with the pandemic, for instance. There we see that much more people and much more individuals start to be interested and be aware about sustainability and how to actually remain relevant along the way with their business. So one big opportunity is that customers also demand brands to be more sustainable. Customers actually want to choose for a service or a product or a brand that has this kind of mindset. So the biggest opportunity, I would say, that you are remaining relevant for your audience, for your customers, for those who are making use of your business. So in that sense, it's about if you still want to be in the business and grow over a long period of time, you need to incorporate some feature of sustainability in your business.
That's interesting. The consumer demand is already happening, and this is also one of the reasons why companies or SMEs will also need to pivot towards sustainability. But there are also many other emerging trends as well. Aaron, I also want to pick your brain on this.
Yep.
What are some of the emerging trends that you can share?
Yeah, thanks. I think some of the emerging trends relevant would be on reporting standards and disclosures. When I say reporting, some of you might already think about, ACCA must be talking about financial reporting. Actually, that's not the case. It's also non-financial reporting is gaining more traction. And like what Marian mentioned about being part of the value chain, the aspirations for SMEs is to supply to another organization, and most of the time that being a larger organization or even public service to the government, right? So as organizations, they also aspire to become sustainable, right? To be relevant in the long run. They will look into their supply chain. They will start doing due diligence in the supply chain. And if, for example, now we say sustainability is a ABC soup, right? So let's talk about the current emergency, the climate emergency. What organizations would endeavor to do is to halve the emissions, the carbon emissions. And they will look at their supply chain and see how can my supply chain help me in cutting or reducing or removing carbon emissions from my supply. So if you change the perception from looking at it as a reporting burden into an opportunity, then SMEs, you have an opportunity to go to your customers, your B2B customer, and say, hey, I'm compliant with this. There are some voluntary standards that you can comply with. Now, for example, if you use paper products, carton products, some of them may ask you, are you FSC, Forest Stewardship Council certified? Right? They may look for certifications like this, and these are voluntary standards, right? At the moment, so it would be helpful that for SMEs to study what are the requirements in your supply chain, right? You look at whom you are supplying to. I guess it also goes back to maybe the 80-20 rule. You look at who are your major customers, what are they concerned about, right? And then you start working towards meeting those standards, getting yourself certified. Now, while we talk about opportunity, Edey, I just got to continue a little bit. The flip side is really about risk, right? The risk is besides you're not being selected as a supplier when your customer has a choice, the other risk is facing mountain amount of paperwork. So that's another findings from a research that ACCA conducted together with SAGE, the computer software, and International Chamber of Commerce, the ICC, which is we found that SMP says they struggle with the amount of detailed questionnaire that the customers send to them. It's a lot of information to provide, and if you have not been preparing of it for it, sorry, then you'll be caught off guard by the amount of disclosure required.
Interesting. So I see some solutions there, and also new challenges as well that might be there. But I want to hear from Jay. What do you think about this predicament? On one hand we have opportunities, right, and then on the other hand we also have new emerging challenges as well. So are the emerging trends there solid enough, to counter this? And what are the hidden opportunities there?
Thanks, Edey. Okay, maybe to lessen the stress on SMEs, right? The good news is this: a lot of SMEs are probably already doing something good, right? Because the thought process now, again, right, contextually, right, you always feel that you need to do all this stuff and it's going to cost me money and all this stuff, right? But in effect, maybe you're already doing some good stuff. Record that, right? And you might not even know that, right? For example, you are supporting a local football club in your kampong, or you are hiring in single mothers and so on, right? So there's a lot of conversation that you can basically put forth in storytelling and just start having the conversation with your buyers and so on. That's one part of it. The second part of it is like what Adams was mentioning. Yeah, there could be potentially a lot of paperwork and a lot of processes to go through and all that, right? But having said that, a lot of infrastructure and support infrastructure from the government is already there on different modes. But if you're able to connect it, for example, the government went about and spoke about Industry 4.0 and offered a lot of support for that. And there's a lot of legacy policies as well that help us to migrate into ISO conformance, for example, which is also not too far away, right? Right. So what I'm saying is that there is a lot of existing support infrastructure that perhaps we are completely foregoing or not looking at because we feel, oh, sustainability is something new. Sustainability is not something new. It's an extension of what has been happening and taking place for a long period of time on different facets of your business, right? It's just that the acceleration of the transformation is now a lot faster, right? I mean, so that's happening, and a lot of companies are feeling the heat. But if they take a step back and reevaluate, for example, training, right? There was a mention about lack of training. There's HRDF, right? So you can always leverage on an existing ecosystem the government has offered. There's CRIM, there's MATRADE, right? So there is, but you might not see it's dedicated sustainability per se, but there's you can basically work on it, right? And even for a dedicated support infrastructure, MATRADE, for example, at least until end of this year, there's about a 30,000 grant available for anybody who wants to do ESG certification. For services companies, there's about 100,000 available to take up, say, FSC certification or RSPO and so on and so forth, right? So there are a lot of support infrastructure that we just have to take a step back and look at it and say, look, these are all building blocks towards moving towards a more sustainable company and operations.
Thank you, Jay. I think you have opened up everyone's ears now. Because when you speak money and you say there's grants available, that's always that's always a game changer. Sharmel, over to you, sir. What do you see? Throw us some pointers that some trends that we might have missed out on.
Yeah, I think it's always difficult being the last one because I think most of it has already been answered. So, but I think all has been pretty much said. To be honest, I think in terms of trends, as I mentioned also at the beginning, there's elevated expectations not only locally but also internationally, right? And I think what Marian mentioned about customer kind of like maturity in terms of what they are expecting from organizations in terms of the products that are being produced as well, which are more lesser in terms of like their environmental footprint, for example. So these things are already coming up, and I think it will certainly be advancing more, especially as you can see in terms of social media as well. You have a lot of young people who are showing a lot of concern in terms of sustainability related issues. You have people like Greta Thunberg who's leading protests when it comes to climate change. So I think the kind of like maturity in terms of the overall population, as we skip a generation, I think the demands for not only organizations, but obviously the expectations for suppliers from the organizations will also increase. However, I think I'd also like to touch on some of the earlier points that was mentioned, in terms of the challenges. I think Aaron and Jay mentioned that as well. So I think for, not only for the SMEs, but also for organizations, because I work for a listed organization. So for any of these challenges, there are obviously opportunities as well that comes with it, right? So it's a matter of how do you actually kind of like compartmentalize it and to identify the areas that are material to you as an organization and to address those areas. Sometimes even for organizations as well. I mean, it's not just the case of SMEs. Due to the complexity and the increasing kind of like expectations, sometimes we are also a bit thrown off the board because we feel that there's so many things that you need to do. Where do you start? How do you start? But I think, as what Marian mentioned, I think the kind of like position in terms of identifying the areas that are firstly material to you. So for clarity purposes, when we're talking about material or materiality, it's essentially issues or areas that that you have an influence in, that directly or indirectly impacts or that you can contribute towards, right? So for example, in the case of energy efficiency, for example, in the case of reduction of your CO2 emissions, for example, in the case of labor conditions as well. So I think, you don't have to look at the broad kind of spectrum of like the 17 SDG goals, as what Aaron had mentioned. But I think it's important to kind of like focus on these bigger footprint areas and to try to understand what those issues are and to try to address those issues. Because at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to make a positive impact, right? And you have to start somewhere. So you do not have to kind of be overwhelmed by these intricacies of these various frameworks, guidelines, expectations of organizations, so on and so forth. But to start somewhere. And I think from our observation as well, many suppliers have already been doing that, especially when it comes to regulatory compliance, for example, aligning to the ISO 14001 management system, to OSHA's 18001 when it comes to quality and safety. So the platform is already there. It's a matter of how do you want to kind of like leverage on that and to touch on the gaps that you have, that you feel that more can be done in, and to do something about that. So that's in a nutshell what I like to.
Yep. Thank you, Sharmel. But I think the question in everyone's mind, or from an SME perspective, they want to know what works, what doesn't work as well. So Marian, I want to ask you, from either your organization's experience or your personal experience, what can you share with us that demonstrate sustainability opportunities that paid off handsomely? It could be within the organization, or it could be something that you know of.
Yeah. Just to give a very practical, simple example of how can be paid off when it comes to finance, for instance, or in your own cost. So at H&M, we started to charge for the paper bags in our stores in Malaysia already since 2019. So what we did is instead of giving, when you go shopping at H&M, instead of giving everyone a free paper bag, now we started to charge. And the reason why we charged is for a few things. Number one, we wanted to reduce the amount of single-use waste. Number two, we wanted to raise awareness and encourage everyone to make use of reusable bags instead. So there, it is interesting because at the same time, we are contributing to the environment by having less single-use waste in the environment. But at the same time, we also save on the amount of bags that we would need to purchase ourselves, because there are less people that are needing the paper bags. So in that sense, that is a very simple but small example of how it can actually save some cost of a company by having this charge, by at the same time reducing the waste, but on the other hand, you need less paper bags yourself because more and more customers are making use of reusables. So that is just, again, looking to your own value chain and see where can you take small actions or small steps. At the same time, it will also have some beneficial in terms of cost for your own operations. Yeah, that is an example, very practically.
Excellent. Thank you. Jay, I'm coming over to you because you opened the floodgates of money. So tell us what works, and how do we monetize, and I mean, this is the question. At the end of the day, it comes down to this, right? So some models that you can share, some success stories as well. Feel free.
Well, okay. so in terms of government support, as I mentioned, there's a whole range that's always there, right? So MATRADE has some funds, Media has some funds, SME Corp has some funds, and so on, right? So the funding mechanism is there and leverage on it. The second part, I think, is a lot more exciting and probably a lot more sustainable as well, market opportunities, right? for example, let's look at COP26. India came out very strongly and said by 2060 they're going to go net zero, by 2030, 50% renewables, right? What does that indicate to us, right? So it basically says if you're going to go to India today with a lot of solar solutions, wind solutions, hydro solutions, and so on, there's a huge amount of opportunities out there, right? China came out with a statement saying that they're going to stop funding for coal. I mean, our local banks have done so. I mean, Maybank and all that have said. But China has been, along with Japan and South Korea, has been the largest funders for coal power plants globally. And Japan and South Korea basically stopped that early this year, and China came out and said they're not going to do it as well. Now, in the pipeline, there were a lot of projects all over the world which was completely reliant on China, funding from China, right? So these projects will now need to be reassessed, right? So there is a need for energy, but coal is not an option anymore. So again, it opens up a lot of opportunities. Going back to India, has come up with a very strong statement, and they want to basically go EV on a big scale. So that's opportunities for automakers, Malaysian automakers, for example, who want to move into the EV position, right? So it is opening up a lot of opportunities. Locally, I think there's maybe only one or two packaging companies that offer FSC grade paper for packaging. And they are sort of monopolizing, I think, pretty much any glove, which is a big export item now, any glove box that's going to US, they need to have FSC certified, right? So that one or two companies that are doing it, well, they are nicely positioned, aren't they? Right? And because they were ahead of the curve. So the trick here is that the window of opportunity is probably another 5 years or so before it gets very crowded, right? So you got to move in quick, and you're going to move in hard. And because it is a lot of it are very pilot in nature, new projects, new ideas, the opportunities are there. PETRONAS itself is very open for new innovations, right? It has put up a 2050 target to go net zero, right? For example, and most of the oil majors, in fact, all the oil majors pretty much have said so as well. So I sort of cover the oil and gas sector, energy sector, and so on. And where we see opportunities within these sectors are any innovation, technology innovations that would be able to assist oil and gas companies to hit their targets, because they've all come out and given up targets, right? Countries on an SDG level and companies on their level, right? So this has opened up huge, tremendous amount of opportunities. So leverage on existing funding infrastructure that the national government has afforded, and as well as the private sector as well. I mean, we work closely with CIMB, for example. CIMB has a whole bunch of funding available for anybody who's going into the green space, and so as a lot of other banks, right? And so this is the way to go. So rather than getting the shoulders dropping, they need to move it up and say, wow, it's the way out.
Okay.
Right? It's not about sustainability versus survivability. Is sustainability equates to survivability, and that is what they need to keep thinking about. Yeah.
So it's important for them to keep their head in the game and look out for opportunities and capitalize quickly as well. It's a first mover advantage as well. Right.
If in the past you did not have a brand, you did not have a price, or maybe they were common denominators, right? They are to a large extent. So you're right at the back of the queue in terms of being a supplier of preference. Today, because you have ESG compliance and so on and so forth, and maybe your competitors don't, guess what? Who's going to move up in front of the queue? Which in the past maybe would have been extremely difficult. So it has completely changed the procurement matrix across the world.
Excellent.
It's once in a lifetime opportunities, and SMEs should get excited about it.
I mean, it is an eye opener. Thank you, Jay. Sharmel, over to you. I want to ask you, SMEs need to work with the end goal in mind. So what should be the end goal in mind? Sharmel? I think Sharmel is having some connection issues. No worries. Aaron, I'm going to jump over to you. Same question.
Right.
What should be the end goal in mind?
Okay, before I go to the end goal, Edey, I just wanted to share something as well. In how do we look into sustainability? How do we demonstrate sustainability can pay off? And even just looking at ACCA is having integrated thinking in our strategy. So by having a strategy, a forward-looking strategy to 2025, actually that allow us to pivot very quickly in the thick of the global systemic shock brought by COVID-19. That allowed us to scale back on some of the strategic efforts that we wanted to perform and move our focus into our supporting our members and future members. Now, one of the things we did was rapidly introducing and expanding our online exams capability and remote invigilation. So that allowed our future members to continue with their journey to become qualified accountants, and also placing greater emphasis on supporting the survival of our members, the SMPs, and those working in corporations. So we developed a COVID-19 hub, which is an information hub on everything related to COVID-19, not only financial reporting related. And also we have created something, the SMP 100 community, so that the practitioners can support each other during the difficult period. And that spiral into a global online hub called the Practice Connect. So it's having our customers' needs at heart, and that allow us to pivot quickly. And we've also moved towards a digital first priority. Now, digital first is not only saying that you travel less or you cut your carbon emissions, but it's also how do we engage with our customers, with our members and future members during a period where we cannot see each other physically, and yet they require assistance, right? So they need help. So how do we change the way we operate and support them? So now back to the question on what is the end goal in mind, is looking at what is important for your business. So if example, if your business is emitting a lot of carbon, you're contributing to carbon emission, and your end goal is you want to do your part and reduce carbon emission, then okay, set that as a goal. I want to reduce carbon emission. Then next thing is to set your a smart goal, a specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and importantly, timeline. You have a timeline. When do you want to achieve that goal? So I'm using reducing carbon emission as an example, but this applies equally to societal impact. So it applies equally to embracing diversity and inclusion in your workforce, in how you hire, you promote, and you offer opportunities to employees, ensuring everyone has equal opportunities, ensuring that we pay a fair remuneration so that together we can eradicate poverty in the community. So having that end goal in mind, right, helps you determine your next step. And how do you determine next steps? By having your final goal, then you work backwards, because from
Okay.
there you will understand what you need to do, put in the process, and have the people to do it.
Excellent. Thank you. Sharmel, are you with us? Okay, right. We lost you for a minute
Yeah.
there, sir.
Yeah.
Welcome
So
back.
sorry about that. Yeah, I mean,
No
this is
worries.
part of the new norm. It's connection problems. So,
Yes.
so I'm glad I managed to
Lines are
get
not
back on.
sustainable.
Welcome back, Sharmel.
Thank you so much. Yeah, hopefully it stays stable now. So are we still on the same question? Eddie?
Yes.
Yes, the question now is, what is the end goal in mind? What should be the end goal in mind?
Oh, the end goal in mind.
Yep. We
So
want
I think,
SMEs to work backwards, right? So we want them to set goal setting is important, right? And we want them to have an end goal in mind. So what should be the end goal in mind?
I think the end goal, I mean, at the end of the day, it depends as well on the SME or the supply chain or the organizations that the SMEs are working for. So I think ultimately, to put it very simply, is to become more sustainable, right? So to become more sustainable, yeah, I mean, many people will say, okay, what does that mean? And sustainability, you know, sometimes if you were to use the word sustainability, it can throw people off the road a little bit because there's misconception, there's misunderstanding in terms of what sustainability is. But at the end of the day, I think to put it in a nutshell, firstly, you know, if we're talking about sustainability, perhaps you know this should have been addressed earlier as well by myself. Is when we're talking about sustainability, you're splitting it according to three main pillars, right? Which is the environmental aspect and the various subcomponents under that, which has already been mentioned in terms of climate change, carbon reduction, and all that. And then you have the social pillar, which is to do with your workforce, the workers that you're working with, and then governance is how are you governing yourself as an organization. But when we put this under one umbrella, it's obviously falls under the umbrella of sustainability. And when we're talking about sustainability, at the end of the day, it's about trying to address the issues of today so that you can prolong your kind of like existence in the future, right? Not only for yourself as an organization, but also as society as a whole. So what role do we as a whole can play? So it's not just the responsibility of the governments or regulators or organizations or suppliers or individuals. It's a collaborative approach. And I think from an SME standpoint, you know, obviously at the end of the day, you cannot run away from the fact that you are a business. Profits is very important, right? Revenue generation is very important. But how can you do that in a way which is efficient, right? Can you increase on efficiency? So just to take an example, I mean, instead of using if say you want to address a particular issue when it comes to minimizing your environmental footprint, right? So you look at like, okay, is there ways that we can improve the efficiency in terms of our environmental footprint? Do we need to use so much packaging? Can we redesign our product, or can we work with our organizations to redesign the product so that it uses less materials? And by using less materials, you're then looking at your life cycle impact, whereby you're contributing towards minimizing the use of resources, which translates towards environmental efficiency, translates towards energy efficiency, translates towards appeal to your organizations as well. Because at the end of the day, it can, or in many cases, it does result in cost effectiveness as well. So I think the end goal needs to be very clear in the sense that, okay, you know, it's not a burden to you to embark on a sustainability journey. What we want to do at the end of the day is we want to contribute towards the bigger agenda to ensure that we're not just existing today. We want to exist in the future in a world that meets the needs of the future generations, right? So what role can we play in doing that? It's not just about, okay, we need to do this so that we can meet our profit-making KPI by the end of the year. How can we do it? Yes, we still need to do that, but how can we do it in a way which is considerate of the various sustainability issues so that it's a holistic approach that we're taking? So I think that's the visualization that not only the suppliers should have, but also, you know, across organizations, across sectors, and across the government as well. So I think that's my
Excellent. Thank you. Now I just want to go around with everyone with one last question before we take in questions from the audience. Now, Marian, doing nothing is an option, and we all know that, right? So, what do you think is the cost of inaction?
The cost of inaction, well, a big cost, because again, we cannot emphasize enough how important sustainability is, especially during this period of time where we actually are already late. I think we have seen with the pandemic, with the climate change, which is such an urgent topic at the moment, we are already late, we meaning everyone actually. So we need to take action. So if you would like to sustain your business, you need to change the way how we do it. And then I would like to emphasize also what has been mentioned already before about the end goal. The end goal should actually be that we are having a shift in the mindset that working in a sustainable way becomes a default mode. So actually at one point, we should not even think about it anymore because it's already integrated in everything that we do, in everything that you do in your business. that becomes like a default mode in order to survive or actually moving ahead and remain relevant for decades and decades. So I think also but really understanding that this is the way in order to grow not only your business, but also your customers, also growing the environment that we're part of, the society, and everything that is part of this ecosystem, that you need to actually take action. Otherwise, it may be difficult to stay in business in that sense. I also think it's important to highlight the cost of inaction is that you're lacking behind in terms of your competitors and also in terms of collaborations. Because when we talk about sustainability, we know we cannot do it alone. Whether how big you are or how small, we need everyone. Individuals, customers, businesses, brands, NGOs, authorities, business leaders, and so on and so on. So one question is then, if you don't take action, you will maybe fall behind of everyone else that is establishing these partnerships and collaborations in order to move towards meaningful growth and a more sustainable future for everyone. So with that, I would also like to highlight again the importance of partnerships, which is sometimes being forgotten when you are an SME or when you are small, thinking that you have to do it all alone, which is not the case either. So it's all about collaborative solidarity, taking action, and the cost of not taking action is you're behind the competitors and behind the demands of the consumers.
Thank you. Jay, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Edey. In 2019, MATRADE initiated something called Sustainability Action Values for Exporters initiative, which was basically to create awareness and build capacity among exporters and make them understand the importance of sustainability. And some of the core messages is that you really need to do this. For example, we are a signatory of RCEP, also CPTPP. Right, RCEP comes into force next year. It's a market of about 25 trillion US dollars. 30% of the world's GDP is in that market, right? This is an ongoing affair. We're opening up markets, we're signing trade deals, and the green component into all these multilateral, bilateral engagements are getting very pronounced. Even internally, I mean, you don't need to go too far. I mean, even internally, for example, under the RMK 12, the green element was extremely pronounced, right? And our Prime Minister has also given, a timeline on Malaysia to achieve and so on. So, and that's local procurement, yeah. So, and government procurement, local procurement, international procurement, everything sort of pivoting towards a green procurement eventually. It's still, I think, to be fair, it's still not as big as it should be, but it's growing exponentially, and it's a trend here to stay. MATRADE has 46 offices worldwide, and every one of our offices, it's a conduit for us to get intelligence, right? Market intel, and everybody's basically saying the same stuff, right? It's happening in every market in different in speed, but it's happening. So it is no more, I think, an option for you to sit out. It's not an option. Yeah, it's either you sit out, you get frozen out of the global supply chain. It's as simple as that. And we cannot afford to. Keeping in mind, Malaysia is an extremely open economy. Export is a huge component of our GDP, and as a country, both from a trade perspective as well as an investment perspective, we can't afford to do this. Let's see from an investment perspective, RE100, for example, all these guys, they want renewables. So if they're going to sort of come to Malaysia and if we're unable to have a green supply chain, it's going to be a struggle for us, right? So ultimately, Edey, I think it's not an option. It is just a matter of how quickly you want to jump onto the bandwagon. And the government is here to provide all the support necessary to hopefully make that transition a smooth one. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Understanding that we have 5-6 minutes left, so I'm just going to quickly go around to Sharmel and Aaron before we get the 2 questions that we have from the audience as well. So Sharmel, quickly let us know, what is the cost of inaction? Why should I act now?
Yeah, okay, so very quickly, given the time constraint, so I think so many of this has already been mentioned by Marian and Jay. So I think it's, just to write on what Jay is saying as well, it's no longer an option. So I think, the expectations, as I mentioned earlier as well, from organizations and the pressure that's coming from the broader stakeholder groups, obviously increasing. So the cost of inaction is essentially, people who do not embark on this journey may potentially be left out, right? So you're closing the doors, you're closing the windows of opportunity. So I think, it's a matter of collaborating and engaging with the people that you're working with, with the organizations that you're working with, to try to find ways and to try to understand the pain points, so that you can open yourself up and you can also increase your appeal, not only to your current organizations, but also other organizations within your locality, but also around the region who have already progressed as far as sustainability is concerned. Yeah.
Thank you. Aaron, over to you.
Yep, thanks, Edey. So one of the cause of inaction is being left out in a competition when customers have choice, right? So you end up with a smaller market. Now, while preparing for the session, I came across this academic study by NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business, and in which they look at the growth, sales growth for consumer packaged products over 5 years, and they see that um, products that are marketed as sustainable products saw a growth of 29% over that 5 years period. And this is in the US. This study was conducted in the US. Now, that may not seem impressive, but if you look at the other perspective, that represents 5.6 times the growth compared to non-marketed as products that are not marketed as non-sustainable. So you'll be losing out on sales growth as customers have choice, right? Especially you have another competitor who are able to meet their demands. The other cost is financing cost. Now, banks are increasingly signing up for the principles of responsible banking. So what happens is they may move away from certain sectors, and you may end up with higher financing costs unless you play ball and meet the sustainable targets. And lastly, I think we have to touch upon your workforce. Workforce is changing. When we surveyed those between the age of between the age of 18 to 25 recently, we found that almost half of them are very concerned about companies' sustainability, and they place purpose higher than higher remuneration, which means this generation are more willing to work for organizations where it aligns with their purpose if they have a choice, right? So that will affect SMEs that are growing when you need to hire new talents.
Thank you, Evan. I think we have time for one question. I just want to take this one question in. If Jay, I'm going to direct this question to you. If a B2B SME finds a reluctance from their customers to adopt SDG-informed sustainable practices, how can they overcome these situations? And can you share any examples as well?
Sorry, the question is not too clear. Basically, what you're saying is that a B2B SME, that means a company that supplies to a B2B and reluctance from their customers to adopt SDG informed. Okay, so they're seeing from a vendor perspective. Wow, okay, so this situation that should not happen. But if I think basically it's a lot of education. And it's also hand-holding. And I think in a way Sharmel alluded just now to a point where you don't have to go and do everything. Right, so maybe one option is to look at the 20% that is absolute priority for you, that could make a difference to you, and then you engage them and try to make the transformation on that 20%. For example, in some sectors, the tipping point is forced labor. Right, so if you can address forced labor and perhaps all the others on hold first, right, and address this main issue that it will be a deal breaker for you, that could maybe help you to move across the line first, and then subsequently make the transformation on a gradual basis. That would be the case.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, I think we are out of time. This is always a challenge when we have such a wonderful panel put together. And, all the content is wow. It really gets the juice going. But unfortunately, we are down to our last minute. Thank you everyone for your sharing. And thank you guys. I mean, the input that you guys gave today, I believe it is very substantial. and it is definitely something that SMEs can use directly. The ideas that has been given and some direction has been given as well. And I believe I speak for the entire panel here that SMEs need to act, and they need to act quickly. There is an urgency for them to act, and they must seize the opportunities quickly, carve out their space, and get their flag up in the market quickly. If not, there is going to be a definite cost of inaction. So I believe the key takeaway today will be that SMEs need to act and act quickly. With that, I would like to conclude our session today. Thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Edey.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.